Howdy everyone and welcome to the Serial Geek TV YouTube channel. My name is James Eatock and today we're going to take a look at the 1981 Spider-Man series and the fact that it didn't actually air in 1981. Although Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends is one of the more fondly remembered animated series of the 80s, far less well known is its immediate predecessor. Simply given the on-screen title of Spider-Man, a title which it obviously shares with several other series also based on the Warcrawler's exploits, the series is often overlooked due to understandable confusion with Amazing Friends, with which it shares innumerable stylistic similarities. Though the solo Spider-Man cartoon began production before Amazing Friends, it didn't actually air until much later. In fact, it didn't air at all in 1981, the year it was copyrighted. The distribution history of the solo Spider-Man cartoon plays a key part in why the show has so often been overlooked. To understand the background behind this, it is important to recap the early history of Marvel Productions. In the late 1970s, DePatie Frayling Productions, most famous for their work on the Pink Panther series of cartoons, produced two animated television shows based on Marvel Comics characters, namely the New Fantastic Four in 1978, yes, the one with Herbie the Robot in, and I won't have a bad word said against him, and Spider-Woman in 1979. As the 70s were drawing to a close, the company began pre-production on a new Spider-Man animated series. However, shortly thereafter, on February 6, 1980, it was reported that DePatie Frayling Productions was to be dissolved. The company's assets were subsequently acquired by Marvel Comics on June 19, 1980, when the formation of Marvel Productions was reported on. One of the reasons behind Marvel Comics founding their own animation studio was to ensure that any future series they produced featuring Marvel Comics characters would remain true to the spirit of the original comics, thanks to the presence of Stan Lee as Marvel Productions' creative director. Stan Lee even made Los Angeles his primary home for a time, as he feverishly ensured that Marvel Productions would become a strong presence in the animation marketplace. Production of the proposed new Spider-Man series that had begun pre-production at DePatie Frayling was resumed by Marvel Productions. It was determined that the new Spider-Man series would eventually be offered as a package with the 1967 Spider-Man cartoon in future syndication. You know, Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. This decision resulted in certain aspects of the series, the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon, being deliberately patterned after the 1967 Spider-Man cartoon, including the presence of Betty Brant, a regular character in the 1967 Spider-Man show, but who had been written out of the comics in late 1979, and also visual elements such as Peter Parker in his civilian identity wearing a blue jacket and a yellow turtleneck sweater that he wore in the later episodes of the 1967 cartoon. Additionally, according to an account from the producer and story editor of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Dennis Marks, the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon was wholly funded by Marvel Comics, partially with the intent of gaining NBC's interest for purchasing a Spider-Man show from the newly created and rather attractive-looking Marvel Productions. But here's the twist. NBC agreed to buy a Spider-Man based show from Marvel Productions, but one that incorporated their desired demographic requirements for a Saturday morning network show. Thus, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends was born. Originally conceived as the Spider-Friends cartoon, the show was produced and first aired on September 12, 1981. But what about the solo Spider-Man series? What happened to it? The earliest known trade ad for the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon from March 1982 indicates that it was offered for syndication alongside episodes of the 1967 Spider-Man series by ARP Films and was specifically described as being new for 82. International packaging of the series also included the first season of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, reflecting original broadcasts of both series in the UK in the mid-1980s, where episodes of both shows were mixed together. Early sales of the show into syndication may have been either sluggish or non-existent, since in the latter half of 1982, Comics Feature issue 22, cover dated December 1982, published an article on the animated Spider-Man series you may never get to see. This article was likely the first time that fans discovered that Marvel Productions had created another Spider-Man series, separate to Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. The article related the production of the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon, whilst also specifically noting that it had not aired at the time of writing, This was likely sometime before the Incredible Hulk and the Amazing Spider-Man joint cartoon block began on September the 18th, 1982, as the 3 Amazing Friends episodes for that season are described as not having aired yet. The following year, in March 1983, ARP Films took out another trade ad, mostly identical to the one from a year earlier, but with the addition of the 3 episodes from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends' second season for international distribution only. From 1968, ARP Films were the distributor to all Marvel Comics-based animated series, with the exceptions being the 1967 Fantastic Four and Fred and Barney Meet The Thing, which both remained with Hanna-Barbera. ARP Films also had an agreement with Marvel Productions that they would distribute the new first-run 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon on a commission basis. The comics feature article and ARP Films ads together conclusively prove that, while produced in 1981 before Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon was still in limbo. With 26 completed episodes and a distribution company in place, regardless of the delayed airing, why was the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon so obscure? There are several factors that no doubt played a part. With the series sharing an identical title to its 1967 predecessor that it was syndicated alongside, it is not unreasonable to assume many viewers simply skipped what they believed to be reruns. One account suggests that episodes of the 1981 Spider-Man cartoon aired in Connecticut in 1983. According to at least one other account, scheduled broadcasts of Spider-Man episodes in 1984 consisted of 2 episodes of the 1967 series, followed by 3 episodes of the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon, 2 standalone episodes followed by an episode from the Doom Saga. Even among viewers who did see episodes of the series in the early 1980s, there was, and remains, much confusion between the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends due to the many shared assets between both shows, including character designs, background music, and some of the voice actors. Perhaps the most important factor impacting awareness of the series was Marvel Productions' relationship with ARP Films themselves, which began to fall apart in 1981, just as preparation for selling the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon into syndication was to begin. With the home video market beginning a new age at the dawn of the 1980s, Marvel partnered directly with other distributors to release videotapes featuring episodes of past Marvel animated shows. This was a decision that did not sit well with ARP Films, who insisted that in addition to television distribution rights, they also had home video distribution rights to Marvel's animated shows as well. Ironically, perhaps with some awareness of the television distribution problems the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon faced, Marvel Productions partnered with Prism Entertainment to create the Marvel Comics Video Library, an extensive series of videotapes from past Marvel Comics-based series, the first 18 volumes of which were released on September 17, 1985, with a second set of 6 tapes released the following year. Included on 11 of those tapes were 11 specifically selected episodes from the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon. In between both sets of Marvel Comics Video Library tapes, Prism Entertainment also released a special compilation movie of several of the Doom Saga episodes entitled Doctor Doom Conquers the World. According to Larry Parr, the writer of the Doom Saga episodes, this compilation movie was at one point intended for theatrical distribution in Europe and syndicated as a television movie domestically. The resulting fallout between ARP Films and Marvel regarding home video distribution rights led to legal action between both companies, and by September 1987, Marvel completely terminated their agreement with ARP Films to distribute any of their animated series for television. Having been freed from the distribution dispute between Marvel and ARP Films, this finally allowed the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon, alongside episodes of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, to achieve wide television distribution as part of the Marvel Action Universe, which was a syndicated cartoon block that began airing on October 1st, 1988. For many fans, this was the first time they ever got to see the solo Spider-Man cartoon from 1981. ARP Films eventually served a lawsuit against the Marvel Entertainment Group regarding the dispute over home video distribution rights, and the case subsequently went to trial in 1989. It was ultimately concluded by the jury that Marvel had indeed breached their original contract with ARP Films, and that ARP were to be awarded $1,220,000 from Marvel. Wow. The fact that the 1981 solo Spider-Man cartoon had an identical on-screen title compared with its 1967 predecessor understandably caused problems in differentiating both series for prospective buyers. For the purpose of distribution as a separate series, the show was, by 1983, simply offered under the title of New Spider-Man. By 1992, the series had begun to be offered as Spider-Man 5000 by Marvel's then owners New World Entertainment, which would serve to cause confusion for many years to come. The 5000 never originally appeared on nor was added to the series title screen and was simply a reference to the series production code of 5000, whereas Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends carried the production code 6000. The 1981 Spider-Man cartoon obscurity persists to this very day, but thanks to the internet, specifically the spiderfriends.com website, which I have used as a resource since the late 90s, it is far easier to illustrate the differences between it and the more famous Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends series. With regards to the show itself, it was decided that the series would explicitly follow the same general story style of Grant Ray Lawrence's 1967 Spider-Man series. Essentially, this meant that aside from Spider-Man himself, the regular cast consisted of J. Jonah Jameson, Betty Brant, and Aunt May. Consequently, the 1981 series was, like its predecessor, mostly episodic, with outright contradictions between both series being few and far between. The majority of the villains in the new series were also seen in the 1967 show, including the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, the Lizard, and the Sandman. Also, as with the earlier series, the 1981 Spider-Man show also included the occasional original villains such as the Stuntman, Sidewinder, Gadgeteer, and Professor Gizmo. Other actual Marvel villains not seen in the 1967 show also appeared in the 1981 series. However, by far the most notable villain in the series was the Monarch of Latveria, Dr. Doom. Long regarded as perhaps Marvel's greatest supervillain, Dr. Doom in the 1981 series was featured in no less than 6 episodes, the last 5 of these comprising a complete story arc spotlighting Doom's tyranny over his homeland Latveria. The fact that Dr. Doom's voice in the series was patterned after the deep vocal tones of Darth Vader indicate that it was likely the Doctor's resemblance to the famous Star Wars villain, assuring his prominent place in the Spider-Man series. In keeping with the fact that this was the very first series Marvel were producing themselves, character designs were heavily based on the definitive style of Spider-Man artist John Romita, whose guidelines were still being followed in the contemporary comics of the time. To ensure that the series was free from the pitfalls of very obvious stock animation sequences, as seen in numerous other US animated shows of the time, Marvel Productions outsourced the animation to South Korean studio Mihan. With animation a step above most US shows and character designs identical to the comics, the 1981 Spider-Man series literally looked as if a comic book had come to life. A notable exception was the episode The Capture of Captain America, which was animated by Toei Doga from Japan and featured animation of a far higher standard. Toei had previously produced their own live-action Japanese Spider-Man series in 1978, as well as an animated Dracula movie based on the Tomb of Dracula comics, and renewed their association with Marvel by initially working on a single episode of the 1981 Spider-Man series, which would lead to many further productions throughout the 80s. Voice-wise, Peter Parker, Spider-Man himself was played by Ted Schwartz, who did an effective job of portraying the character's slightly world-weary nature, as well as coping with an array of quick-witted wisecracks. Jameson was voiced by William Woodson, who by that point had been heard for several seasons as the narrator on Super Friends. Betty was voiced by Mona Marshall, and Aunt May by Linda Gary, a role she would reprise over a decade later in the 90s Spider-Man series. Although many of the voice casts were changed for Amazing Friends at the behest of Dennis Marks, who felt that the 1981 series cast could be improved upon, some actors played the same roles in both series, including William Woodson's J. Jonah Jameson, and additionally George DiCenzo as Captain America and Peter Cullen as the Red Skull. Along similar lines, writer Donald F. Glue always made sure that his episodes of Amazing Friends never contradicted the Solos series, making Amazing Friends the final part of a loose trilogy, with the original 1967 series and the 1981 series as the first 2 installments. Only adding to any potential confusion between the Spider-Man series and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, 2 episodes of Amazing Friends were loosely based upon 2 episodes of the 1981 series, with Triumph of the Green Goblin based on Revenge of the Green Goblin, and Attack of the Arachnoid based on The Web of Nephilia. Today, with numerous animated series and 9 live-action movies under the character's belt, and a much celebrated animated movie with Into the Spider-Verse, the 1981 Spider-Man series stands simply as one of the many different interpretations of Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's famous creation, albeit as an important intermediate step sandwiched between the more famous 1967 Spider-Man and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. That it serves very well as a companion piece to the fondly remembered Amazing Friends ensures that the Forgotten Spider-Man will always be somewhere close behind its more famous successor, a hidden gem of Marvel Productions' brief dalliance with Marvel Comics' own properties waiting to be seen once again. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share and subscribe.